Well, hello again. Welcome to another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber, coming to you from inside the state capitol as the 2025 legislative session rolls along. It is Women's Day here at the Capitol under the Gold Dome. So today we're going to theme our show around women's issues and a lot of topics that bring women to the forefront, which is always a great thing. And it's always a great thing to talk to this woman, Senator Amy Grady from Mason County. Thanks so much for your time again. High-ranking member of the Senate, so what better person to come in and talk about women's rights and just your role as a high-ranking female legislator. It's a lot different than what it was a few generations ago, right, when it was an old boys network. And so just maybe start off by talking about what it's been like being here at the state capitol and how we've seen that kind of shift from a male-dominated political arena to where we have some women now making a strong voice.
Yeah, so Rick, I was really surprised when I came into the Senate. Like you said, it's always been the boys' world, right? And so when I came in, I had that mindset of nobody's really going to want to listen to me. I'm this bubbly teacher, blonde hair, and but it was quite the opposite, actually. I think I work with a lot of gentlemen who really value the input that I have, and I've really always appreciated that. So I try to make sure that what I do offer is a different perspective that maybe they can't see, So I think women bring a lot to the table when it comes to the legislature because we see things from a different perspective, and that's important for us to be able to represent that.
And when you talk about women's rights, sometimes, you'll hear arguments and one side will say, like, what are they talking about women's rights? What rights do they have that nobody else has? That kind of thing. It becomes a semantic argument almost.
Yes.
But really, the theory behind it all is just making sure that the rights of women and everybody are brought to the forefront, and that rights that maybe singularly affect women are talked about, are discussed, so that you don't just push that aside because, when you're talking about any group, it could be women, minorities, anybody. It's important for everyone to have that voice.
Right, everyone needs a seat at the table because we all have different perspectives and we all live through life in a different way. And so, biologically, men and women are different. And so we see things differently, we experience things differently, and it's really important for women to have that seat and to make sure that we have that role. I, as a teacher, love to be in this role because I love for my students to see me as a strong female leader. Prior to coming into the Senate, we used to have our career day at school, right. And where you dress as what you want to be when you grow up, and you never saw senators or anything like that. And now, since I've become a senator, every time we have it, there are at least a handful of little girls that come in dressed in their suit jacket, and they have a badge on, and they'll come up and they'll say, "Mrs. Grady, what do you think I am today?" And of course, I guess these crazy things like, "Oh, you're a scientist." Oh, and this, "No, I'm a senator." And that's so touching because it shows them, hey, you know what? My teacher did it, and I can be in a role like that too. And so I think it empowers younger girls to see us in positions like this, and that's really important for the future.
Now, politics, we talked about historically, was a male-dominated field. Schooling has always been the reverse. Teachers historically have skewed more toward females. You're an education chair here at the Capitol, so education's big on your agenda. I know that you've run some bills this session that have a lot of people talking. Just talk a little bit about the status of those bills, what you were happy to get through, what maybe you were unhappy that didn't get through, and where we stand right now.
Well, we don't have a lot of things right now to talk about that haven't gotten through because actually we passed a lot over, and the House is still working on some Senate bills that I sent to them, and I'm really happy about that. The number one issue, and I think we talked about this before, was the discipline bill that we had tried to pass last year. We worked on it together over the course of this session, and it's turned out to be a much better bill. We're still waiting on the House to pick up that message. Well, it adds a lot more details into it in what we would do to help students who may be outliers, foster kids, for instance. The original bill from last year set up this situation where we were assuming that schools were doing things already to try to help these kids. And that assumption should be happening. But then I realized, we need to say in there what you need to do prior to removing the kids from the classroom. We have, for instance, foster kids that come into schools. They may change schools 2 or 3 times a year. And maybe they come in and they're at a point where they're just having an emotional day, something triggers them to remind them of a traumatic experience, and if they have a violent outburst, but it's just one time, we shouldn't remove that kid. We should set up some sort of parameters and say, hey, here's a plan. We're going to try to get you to work towards improving that behavior. And that's the most important thing. We want to keep kids in school. We want to give them the resources they need and not just kick kids to the side and say, sorry about your luck, you don't belong here, right? So it adds in some of that so that we can make sure that we're giving every student an opportunity. We're talking about elementary school kids, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. They deserve second chances, and so that's what this bill does now.
Now, earlier you talked about the biological difference between men and women. So I think you know where I'm heading with this one. One of the social issues that has a lot of people talking are these women's Bill of Rights type of bills that we're seeing in different states that one side says is to protect women, is to differentiate that we want to keep safe spaces safe for women. And the other side saying this really isn't a huge issue, you're blowing it out of proportion, and in doing so, we're oppressing this trans community that doesn't have any voice whatsoever. It's a challenging and nuanced argument either way. I know where you stand on that, but you do really feel that making sure that we have a clear delineation of two genders, man and women, that keeps spaces safe for women.
Absolutely, I believe so. I'm a mom of 2 girls. I coach girls sports, and so I think protecting those spaces for girls is the most important thing. We've worked so hard to make sure that girls have the same opportunities as men, as boys. For a long time, there were no girls sports teams, and just the thought of that being eroded by us not clearly defining what we want and what we need is disturbing to me. And so my number one goal is to protect our young girls, and if that's what we need to do by defining what a man and woman is, then that's what I think needs to be done.
Is there a solution that can make everybody happy?
Is there ever a solution, Rick, that can make everybody happy? I have learned really quickly in this world that no, you can't make everybody happy. And if you focus so much on who you're going to make mad, then you're never going to get anything accomplished. So my goal is if I vote on something and I pass something and I can lay my head down at night and know that I feel like I did the right thing, then it was the right decision. I can't focus on who's going to be mad about something that I vote on or don't.
So I know you have floor here, so we'll get you out of here soon. But if you walk around and you talk to people on Women's Day, what kind of feedback are you getting from women out there in West Virginia about where we stand now, maybe compared to generations in the past?
I don't really bring up where we stand versus generations in the past, other than the fact that are we heading in the right direction? And the women that I talk to believe we are. And a lot of people want to make sure it's so divisive, right? And it shouldn't be. I don't think it should be something that's divisive. I think it's something that we need to make sure that we're just looking at. This is a way for us to protect our women and make sure that women are empowered. And anybody that views it another way is wrong, because we're not trying to say somebody else doesn't matter, but what we're just trying to do is protect our women, protect the rights, and make sure that our young girls understand, be proud to be a woman, and it's okay to be a woman, and you should be proud and you should have goals. That's our number one goal, is to make sure that our young girls are looking up and thinking ahead, that they want to be in powerful positions one day.
One of the biggest issues from the left that you'll hear when you talk about women's rights is reproductive rights, which is the abortion issue. Obviously, most Republicans and most conservatives stand on the other side of that. So how do you reconcile that? I know that the argument from the right will be like, well, abortion is a women's issue. Even being against abortion can be looked at as a women's issue if you take our stance on it. But that's a challenging issue as well.
Well, I think that when we think about women's rights, a woman's right to reproductive rights, you also think there's another human being involved in that. We're not making a decision based on our body only. We're making a decision based on another human being's life. And that takes out of consideration that it's just our decision. In my opinion, that's a human life that also should have a say, but they don't. And so we need to protect that. That's the most innocent of us is the unborn, and I think we need to protect them at all costs.
Getting down to the nitty gritty now, we'll gavel out before you know it.
I know.
What can get done between now and then? What do you hope to get done over these last couple of weeks?
Well, I'm hoping we've got a school mapping bill that's out there that would allow for school safety mapping to be taking place in every single school. I think that's so important that our law enforcement officers have maps where they can access in case of an emergency. We have not seen anything happen in West Virginia, thank goodness. Yeah. But we want to be proactive rather than reactive, and this would help us to do that. So that's the number one issue that I hope that gets in the budget this year, because I think it's so important.
All right, Senator Amy Grady, we thank you for your time, and I appreciate you stopping by. We'll let you get back to work, and you still got a lot of work to do. And we'll get back with more Outside the Echo Chamber right after this. We'll be speaking with Delegate Kathie Hess Crouse as Outside the Echo Chamber continues from inside the state capitol.
Are you ready to unlock a future filled with remarkable pay, unbeatable benefits, and unparalleled satisfaction? Imagine embarking on a journey that offers you a college-level education without the weight of debt, all while earning a steady income. Look no further than the West Virginia Building and Construction Trades Apprenticeship Programs. Join us, and together, let's build a future that's brighter and stronger. Go to actwv.org to apply today. The West Virginia Building and Construction Trades, where the future is forged.
Welcome back inside the state capitol and outside the echo chamber, continuing our discussion on Women's Day here under the Gold Dome. Joining me now is Delegate Kathie Hess Crouse from Putnam County. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me today, Rick.
And, we were talking a little bit with Senator Grady just about the overall theme of Women's Day and what it means to you as a female legislator and what it means to you to be able to come in here and be a high-ranking member of the House at a time where, in years past, historically, it's been a political arena that's been dominated by men. So just, do you wear that as a badge of honor? And what's it like just walking around with all these Neanderthals around?
I do wear it as a badge of honor, but I've always worked with men all the time, so it hasn't been anything unusual for me. And they treat me like one of the guys here, and in a good way,
Sure.
not in a bad way.
Right.
And they come to me with asking for advice, just as I go to them asking for advice. So it's been nice. I love it down here.
Now, you've been at the forefront of some bills surrounding women's rights, and I know a lot of times when people talk about women's rights, it gets into a semantic argument because people are like, well, what rights do people have right now that other people don't? I think, women have the same rights that men do, but I think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the theory behind it isn't necessarily a semantic word-for-word argument. It's more or less just making sure that issues that are important singularly to women and issues that are important to families, that women are obviously play a huge role in that, are staying at the forefront and that are being discussed in an appropriate manner.
Yes, and I'm bringing some to the forefront that hasn't been brought before. I didn't bring it this year, but next year I plan on working on a menopause bill for women because that is something that's big. But overall this year I've ran a couple bills that focus on women
Sure.
and women's rights, women overall, and I think that's important that we have that view here too.
Now, there was a bill that I believe last I saw it was in finance. I don't know if it ever got reported out. Basically dubbed the Women's Bill of Rights.
Yes.
Just talk a little bit about that bill and what the aim was there and what you thought about it.
So the Women's Bill of Rights, it did not come out of finance. Not that they didn't want to run it, they did, but the governor had put in the definitions of male and female, and that pretty well covered most of it. So we didn't run that one.
You thought that was more
particularly.
redundant at that point.
Yeah, at that point. So we did not run that one. We ran his instead, and it's already been signed and
Right.
everything. So, but that just protected women's spaces, single-sex spaces that needed to stay single-sex spaces, women's locker rooms, women's sports. Because having those dominated by men coming in saying that they're women was taking away all opportunities that the women have because there are biological differences between you and me.
Sure.
Whether you say you're a man or you say you're a woman, you still have biological differences that I don't have as a woman.
Is there a way to find some type of middle ground on that issue? You don't know what you don't know, and you try to be self-aware. And I've been trying to read up on it as much as I can because it's an issue that seems to have been coming to the forefront more recently. And reading up on it, it's so nuanced and it's so challenging. I don't think there's anyone that would argue that there are times when you are almost infringing on other people's rights by doing something else, right? Sometimes there's no perfect solution. It's one or the other or a mix of both. But is there something that can be done that we can come to an agreement that, okay, these people do need to be treated in a humane fashion. They're human beings as well, but we also do have to protect safe spaces for others as well.
Right, and we're not saying treat them bad, treat them wrong, treat them in a
trans
hard.
community,
Yeah, we're not saying that at all. But there is a biological, DNA, physiological difference, and in some of those spaces, as in women's sports, I don't see a way for that to overlap. Now, if they want to compete, they want to start a third leg of sports, men's sports, women's sports,
like
trans
open
sports,
division or something
open division, something along that line, then that's fine. But for women's sports, there is a difference physiologically and biologically, and all we are doing are erasing women. And I won't stand for that. I can't stand for that.
I know that you've sponsored or co-sponsored a number of homeschooling bills as well. For when you talk about women's rights, sometimes you don't realize how far-reaching that can be. women are oftentimes the homemakers of the house, which is already a very underappreciated job.
I was there for 20 plus years.
And then you add something like teaching your child at home, that can become even more cumbersome. And just the whole school choice kind of thing. Just talk a little bit about that issue and how it does relate to women and families' rights in your mind.
So in my mind, as you said, women are typically, not always, but typically the ones that are home teaching the child if they are being homeschooled. So it does become a women's right in a roundabout way, right, because they are the ones taking away from their career, from any other outside opportunities they may have, and they're focusing on their family, on the children, on their education. So
what kind of homeschool bills were brought up this year during session?
So one of my big ones was opening up a statewide portal and moving all of our paperwork to the state instead of to the counties, because right now the counties, well, to be point blank, they just don't do their job. They don't do it well. They lose a lot of paperwork. Every time I fix one problem in a county that's coming up with the homeschooling issue, they bring in a new attendance director or a new superintendent, and a whole new set of problems pop up. So I felt it was better to have one place, one single entity to go to fix all these problems, and that happens to be the State Board of Education.
I've talked to a lot of people who feel that the way we do these school boards, or we have 55 boards for 55 counties, is a bit antiquated.
I would have to agree with that.
Do you foresee any common ground there of getting something done where, we hate to see job losses, and anytime you're consolidating, you're probably talking about cuts. And we'll be talking a little bit with a woman who's worried about the federal programs that are making some drastic cuts statewide as well. Do you think we'll get to a place where people can agree that maybe we do need to downsize the scope of these county boards around the state, and maybe do like a metro, or maybe instead of 55 there's 25 or something like that?
I'm not sure if we'll ever get to it, but I know we are looking into it. I do believe it does need done. We have many counties that have very few students in them. When I say very few, I mean under 800 students or so. And they could easily be combined with an adjacent county that has maybe a little larger population, or maybe even the same population, and that they're close enough in driving distance and everything that there could be a centralized location that's easily accessible by both counties, or maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6 counties, whatever the case may be, that needs to be done.
That's probably the balance that needs to be struck, is you don't want something too far away.
Right.
Because you need some hands-on, so you don't want to have to drive 3 hours to get your local board.
Exactly.
But it does seem to be a recipe for inefficiency and waste if you're dealing with something where the entire county only has a couple hundred kids in it.
Right. And if you have, maybe one superintendent and several assistant superintendents, and you're paying out millions of dollars to upkeep of the Board of Education and all the personnel and everything, when that could be combined closely and locally with the surrounding counties or what have you, we could save millions and millions of dollars. When I first came into the legislature, I did start on a bill. I put it aside because the way I was going with it, we looked at everything and the geography of West Virginia, and it just wasn't going to work out. So we kind of stepped back and said, well, maybe we need to rethink this on how we would combine them. And I think it would be well combined, having maybe 20 or maybe even 30 school districts. But we need to seriously look at that. We can't put it off the table, because we need to look at it as on the table.
You're a Republican, conservative. Now, do you find that a bit challenging? Because most people would look at women's rights, and the things that always come to mind are abortion and social issues that the people that are touting women's rights tend to be on the left side of. Is it challenging facing those issues from the right and still saying, nobody's trying to erase women here. We are for women's rights. We just come at it from a different angle.
I have not had any issues with it. I mean, of course, people come after me because of how I feel about things, but I'm very solid and strong in how I feel about them and why I feel those ways. So for me, it hasn't been a challenge that way. Now, of course, it is still a challenge to get those bills across or get those ideas across. But as with abortion, it's not that I feel that you don't have a right to your own body and what you should do, but I feel that that baby is its own person. So your right stops at their life. And that's where I come from.
Overall, do you think that we're either in a good place or heading toward a good place when it comes to women's rights and it comes to making sure that everyone has a voice?
I think so. The men here tend to listen. Maybe not as well sometimes, but
my wife would disagree with you on a lot of those, but yeah.
They tend to listen some.
Yeah.
But it's getting better. It's getting better.
Well,
I think we're headed in the right direction.
We've passed crossover day, heading toward the finish line now. Is there anything that you still want to talk about or still need to work on between now and the time they gavel out?
I've got several bills over in the Senate right now, I think 6 or 7. 2 of them are actually on agendas for today. One is reporting positive alpha-gal results to the CDC so we can better track the spread of alpha-gal within West Virginia. This is a large problem that I don't think we know about yet.
All right. Delegate Kathie Hess Crouse, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you
and
for
don't go
having
anywhere
me.
because we'll have much more outside the echo chamber from inside the state capitol coming up right after this.
CJU is a great company to work for. We've been around for 78 years. We are an underground utility construction company all across the East Coast. We are rapidly growing and we're seeing a huge growth in this market, a huge need for employees. We are always looking for those that are experienced, those that are trying to get their foot in the door. We have positions for everybody. We offer competitive pay, we offer competitive benefits. We take pride in having a family atmosphere at CJU's, and it's truly just a family company.
Welcome back inside the state capitol on this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. You know, as we talk about these issues that affect everyone throughout the session, things pop up, and one of the big issues that has a lot of people concerned right now, especially on both the state and federal level, are the cuts that are coming from the White House because of DOGE and what they claim are looking for inefficiencies and fraud and waste and trying to trim down government a little bit. And we're pleased to have Crystal Young with us right now. She's an ICU nurse up in Martinsburg. I know that you're concerned about the cuts that we're seeing in hospitals and in education in a lot of different fields. Just talk a little bit about your experience and what you're worried about and what maybe people aren't seeing. I mean, there's nobody that's against eliminating fraud and waste.
Correct.
But just making sure that it's done in a responsible way and why you have some concerns about the way it is being done.
Yeah, it needs to be done more in a surgical manner. So speaking from, the nursing aspect of it, the main thing that they're saying is they want to go back to 2019 staffing.
Right.
The problem with that is in 2019, we didn't have the PACT Act. So with the PACT Act, just fiscal year of 24, the West Virginia, VA medical centers saw roughly about 1.4 million visits. Just think about that number for a second. We went from just, random going through the day to pushing to about 1.4 million visits. That West Virginia alone serves roughly about 100,000 veterans. We don't have the structure nor the staff to sustain that if you want to take us back to 2019. It's 2025. The PACT Act has put in a large amount of veterans coming through the door. We need to staff up, particularly at the bedside. The nursing shortage is a real thing within the VA.
So how do you make sure that, because you get in a situation where anytime there are cuts, people are like, well, not me. So there are going to be a lot of different people saying, well, cut them, don't cut us.
Correct.
I do believe that if anything, COVID showed us how bad those staffing shortages can get across the board in the medical field.
And we're still hurting. We haven't recovered.
So how have you felt the best way is to make sure that they're understanding and not just, you said it, doing things surgically, maybe with a scalpel rather than a hatchet.
Yes. So actually talking to the people that do the job, you can come in and you can speak to, the head of the agency. They don't know what I do in the ICU. They've never met me. They've never been there. If you actually come into our VAs, you'll be welcomed in open arms. We'll walk you around, show you what we do. We have nothing to hide. We all took an oath to care for the veterans, and at the end of the day, we're going to stand by that. If you're going to make the cuts, and the cuts don't essentially affect the forward-facing nurses, as I am, but those cuts are then going to go down towards, say, the techs or, people that are bringing in our supplies. So what that's going to then leave is I need those supplies. So now as an RN, I have to leave the bedside because you removed those supply workers. Then I now have to go get my supplies. Then I have to come back to the bedside. So it ultimately is affecting our veterans, and they're not going to get the care that they are going to be receiving.
Now, when we've seen these cuts in other fields, it's pretty consistent. The response that we get from the administration in D.C. is, oh, we're not cutting anything that's essential. We're cutting probationary workers. Like when we're talking about like with the aviation industry, they're like, we're not cutting air traffic controllers. We're not cutting pilots. These are all just non-essential probationary workers. If they say that about your field, you don't buy that.
I don't, because those probationary employees were needed. That's why they were hired. Particularly those that touch a veteran. Everybody in the VA sector has an importance, whether it's behind the scenes with a veteran at the call centers, whether it's actually at the bedside in an ICU touching a patient physically. We all have a necessity, and you're telling us that we're not necessary, which then tells me that you don't really care about the veterans, because the veterans took an oath. They, fought with their lives, some of them, and then now coming back, a lot of them are broken. And we're there to put them back together. And if we don't have all the pieces to put them back together, I can't do my job.
So you're here at the Capitol on Women's Day. So
Yes.
You walk around, people are like, oh, we have to
Yes.
listen to her now.
Yes.
From a state perspective, is there something you can do talking to the legislators at this level? And federally speaking, is there something you can do to get in touch with our representatives in D.C.? And if so, how does that look for you?
So I am actually the National Nurses United director for Martinsburg, and with the executive order that President Trump, just signed last week, he wants to eradicate essentially our collective bargaining agreements, get rid of our offices and our union equipment, and that's fine. The union is not an office space. The union is not, phone calls. The union is the actual collective of people, and we have a voice. And so we're going to be meeting, officials. We're going to be talking. We're going to go door to door, because at the end of the day, if the veterans aren't there, then we don't have a job.
So you lean on your union leadership and hope for them to squeeze what you need out of the politicians in both Charleston and D.C.
We're going to do an escalation of actions. We're going to be doing a couple rallies, passing out some flyers, making some phone calls, going to talking to our veterans groups, because this ultimately affects them.
And anyone that's watching or listening right now, what can they do? If they're watching this going, yeah, Crystal's right, how do I get involved?
Yep. Call your senators, call your House representatives, call your delegates, call any of your West Virginia affiliates. And then if anyone broadly through, the United States, reach out, talk to family, talk to friends, talk to your veterans. I know everybody knows at least one veteran, and it affects them.
All right, Crystal Young, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good luck talking to the floor's about to get out, so you can get out there and
mingle some more.
Some of the legislators.
Absolutely.
Let your voice get heard. All right, Crystal Young, thank you. And thank you for joining us again. We want to thank our other guests today as well, Senator Amy Grady and Delegate Kathie Hess Crouse. And we'll be back next Tuesday as the legislative session rolls on with another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber, continuing to talk about issues that are important to you and your family. Until then, I'm Rick Lord. Take care.